Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest edition of CouncilCast, the official podcast of the Council of Insurance Agents and Brokers. I'm Michael Koenig, former Capitol Hill staffer and digital director here at the Council. Today, we are joined again by our esteemed government affairs team, and we're going to take you around the horn to talk about what's going on in D.C. and how it might impact your business. So seated appropriately to my left this time, we have...
Joel Coppard. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs at the Council. And to my left...
You never know what's up, down, left, or right anymore.
You go far enough right, you come to the left, yeah.
Joel Wood, I'm Senior Vice President of Government Affairs, and...
Blair Bartlett, I'm Director of Government Affairs.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us, guys. There is a lot that has happened since the last time we spoke, and... You know, it's rare to see anybody in their 40s retire in D.C., and it's especially rare to see it when it's the Speaker of the House. So, Joel, I know you have some thoughts. I'll kick it right to you.
Well, my first thought when you put it that way is that Republicans who have other lives, do tend to move on to them as opposed to Democrats.
My mind went to the same place.
So, there are implications for Speaker Ryan, for our members stepping down. I mean, first of all, I regard him as a good friend. He spoke at our legislative summit. He's been enormously responsive on a lot of things, and to the extent that many of our member firms are benefiting from tax reform, and we're in purgatory on the pass-through stuff, but we'll talk about that in a second. He's been, a terrific friend to the council, and we will miss him. That said, the number one congressional leader who supported elimination of the employer exclusion from taxation for group health benefits was Paul Ryan. And so we talk about that a lot, but that is the existential threat to much of our member firms' business. And so I think that takes a little bit of the wind out of the sails of those who want to drive to the purest consumer vision of healthcare. And so that, I hate to use the word silver lining on anything, but it's very difficult to see how it's all going to play out. I think ultimately if the president says that Leader McCarthy is going to be his man, Steve Scalise has indicated that he will be on the team and his first job is to support him. We regard ourselves as good friends of both, of Steve Scalise, of Kevin McCarthy. It'll be very interesting, and also it has implications, who knows, we may not be talking about the next speaker being a Republican, right, Joel?
Yeah, before we move on, there's buzz in Democrat circles that the second you resign in a position like that, you're automatically a lame duck. We still have almost a year left of this Congress ahead of us with a lot of must-pass legislation, including, our parochial flood insurance program, but there's spending bills, there's the National Defense Authorization Act. Do you think he is a lame duck now that he's announced his retirement?
I've heard it. I've been with several members, including some that are, some of the Freedom Caucus types obviously feel that way. There's something to be said that, from the fundraising perspective, with Republicans, with the wind in their faces, and the expectation that at least $100 million needs to be raised by the Speaker's Super PAC, you can make that argument, and that may well happen, but, I take the Speaker at his word that he's intended to ride out this, and that there's a lot that he can do to compensate in the meantime politically, but damn, it's a tough environment for Republicans out there. We've got an enthusiasm gap of about 12 points. I'm hopeful, as a Republican myself, that we bottomed out here in April as opposed to bottoming out in October.
Yeah, Democrats are elated with 40 Republican retirements now. Democrats only need 23 seats to take back the House of Representatives, with 40 Republicans retiring. 19 Republican districts voted for Hillary Clinton. The map's really clear. The amount of women that are running in primaries is through the roof. The amount of competitive Democratic primaries is upside down. The DCCC all of a sudden finds himself in an awkward position of not trying to get involved in some of these races because they're so intense with a lot of great candidates running. But yeah, Democrats are extremely enthusiastic about November.
We want you to be very cocky, Joel.
just the facts.
Well, before we get to November, is there even worth mentioning the House Freedom Caucus, Jim Jordan talking about potentially challenging Kevin McCarthy?
Jim Jordan,
from Ohio. Is there any impact there?
My belief is that Jim Jordan is not going to win a leadership position. That's just my view. Let me mention, though, the primary legacy for Speaker Ryan, obviously, is the tax bill. And for our C corporations, that for the most part was a win. For some of them, a big, big win. For many of the private equity fueled firms in the brokerage space, it was maybe a little bit of a net negative, but it wasn't nearly as bad as on the debt financing provisions as we thought that it might be. But most importantly, 2/3 of our member firms are structured as pass-throughs, as LLCs or S corporations, partnerships, and we have been in a state of flux as to whether or not the provisions ultimately for creating a special 20% 5-year favorable tax rate, which could be dramatically impactful to many of our member firms, as to whether or not that's going to apply, based on all the provisions that giveth and then taketh away, juxtaposed on top of the tax code. We've had initial good meetings with Treasury. We are filing this week formal comments with the Treasury Department. We're talking to a lot of members about what their intent is. I'm going to be with a major member who is engaged on the pass-through issues on the Republican side tonight. And so this is something that I think is our biggest issue left in the year. Now, remaining from that, though, I do want to segue really quick and ask Blair to comment on this, because we do have, as Joel mentioned, the one big outstanding thing that Congress is going to need to act on, and this is looking like a cluster right now, is reauthorization of the federal flood insurance program, where Chairman Hensarling successfully disengaged reauthorization from the omnibus budget resolution. And so we're looking at the prospect of an expiration of the NFIP on July 31st, smack in the middle of hurricane season. So what's going on that, Blair?
So the House passed its flood reform and reauthorization bill, and it was pretty much dead on arrival in the Senate. And so the Senate feels that it kind of needs to do its own reform package, but from what I'm hearing is that it's going to be significantly pared down from what the House did. The House was 150 pages. The Senate, we've heard that it's going to be anywhere from 40 to 50 pages and wouldn't be as comprehensive. I think the issue on the Senate side, the sticking points are quote unquote cherry picking and opening it up to the private market.
Particularly on the surplus line side, and the perception that there would be adverse selection through it's something that we overcame in the House with a more than 400 votes, but we can't seem to get there on the Senate side.
Yeah, something that unanimously passed with bipartisan support on the House side is having problems on the Senate with Republicans and Democrats. And another issue is when in the House bill you are opening up the NFIP data and to private companies, and there are data privacy concerns on the Senate side. And so it's us with coalition members, with insurers, with trade associations, working with Senate staffers, with senators, and trying to figure out what can we do.
Blair, is there any conversation from Senate staffers' perspective about take-up rate? I mean, we talk about this cherry-picking issue, and I completely understand their concerns, but it seems to me, following last year, which we experienced more commercial insurance losses in history because of more and more storms that are happening more frequently, right? The lesson learned from 2017 to me is that the take-up rate for flood insurance was below 20% in Florida, in Houston, in Puerto Rico, in all of these storm-savaged areas. They ought to be, I think, focused on increasing the take-up rate, and I feel like that would be a roundabout way of addressing their cherry-picking concern if we could just increase the policies that are purchased. Is that at all part of the conversation?
Not necessarily. It would be great if it was, and it would be great if there was an enforcement mechanism, but then that's when you get into a gray area.
That's when you've got the politics of the realtors and the home builders and the banks who don't want to enforce. Everybody wants to go to heaven on this, and nobody wants to die.
It's not groundbreaking, right? Enforce current law.
Yeah.
Let's pivot on that. You mentioned data privacy, that element of flood insurance reform. I'm just back from the RIMS meeting in San Antonio, and the dominant theme there was cyber risks. There were multiple, I think, scores of different meetings, official meetings, breakout sessions, presentations on cyber-related issues, the silent cyber risk, and and especially on data breach notification requirements. We do not have a lot of case law built up on this stuff, and we have now the de facto national standard being the New York standard, with the NAIC flailing on their attempts to have a model law enacted. You've got all the states but 2 that have had some sort of a data breach notification provision out there. And then you've got the European Union privacy standard set to be enforced at the end of May of this year. Blair, you've been involved in discussions on trying to get a preemptive federal single data breach notification standard, but that seems like many other things to be a circular firing squad within the insurance industry. Could you just give a brief update on where we are with that?
Yeah, so Congressman Blaine Luetkemeyer is working on legislation for the financial services industry to have a single data breach notification. And there is, in the beginning when we were working on the bill, there was going to be a carve out for insurance because obviously the insurance industry is regulated by the states, not the federal government. And we are in the process of firming up that language, working with the trades and the carriers and trying to determine what is going to be helpful in a situation where there is a data breach, so we don't have another Equifax.
So the one observation that I have is that, like almost everything else, this town is so polluted with polarization right now that it's difficult to see how you see how tiny little provisions in this flood insurance thing that you can get unanimity on in the House of Representatives that can't seem to allow us to move forward there. And so why on something as complex as data breach and cyber insurance do we think that something could get there? What I've heard from congressional staff this week is that they want to be ready to move, that if there's another Equifax type of event, that wherever this bill stands right now and however many disagreements there are, that Congress is going to want to move swiftly and potentially in a bipartisan way. We just don't know what that's going to be. But if we have that kind of an inflection point, this could be the case. And so we got, it's the old line we use, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And this is going to impact our member firms a lot. Let me finally just pivot to health insurance related issues.
I had one thing quick on GDPR. I'd be remiss if I didn't
European
mention.
standard.
Yeah, we are going to be hosting a webinar. We're about to announce it, I think, later today on May 7th about GDPR, and it's going to be moderated by someone from Clements Worldwide. We're going to have folks on the phone from legal experts from BDO and Steptoe. It's probably going to be May 7th at 10 a.m. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to go to CIAB.com, look for that on our events calendar very soon. Vladimir Golubov is our kind of international contact, and he's the one coordinating the webinar. So if you know Vlad, if you're a member of the International Working Group, feel free to email him with any questions.
You got any clients that have any European connection, you got to be informed on this. You've got to have a compliance regime in good order. The good news, the bad news on this. The good news is that if you meet that standard of the GDPR, then you're probably good to go underneath every state law that is there because it is a higher standard. The bad news is that it just is, this is a vast unknown in terms of what the compliance burden is going to be. They left a lot of wiggle room in there for what best practices are and to have some exclusions. So this is going to take some time to play out. So back to the final issue, I'll just ask Joel, general state of play on all ACA issues, anything left as we approach this fall's major increases in the exchanges, anything left in terms of the cost-sharing subsidies, the reinsurance payments that Congress might do on
I think
healthcare?
any ACA-related legislation is probably going to be put off until the lame duck at the earliest. I had lunch with Senator Patty Murray last week, and we were, of course, very supportive of her market stabilization bill that she was pushing with Senator Lamar Alexander, which would have increased flexibility for state 1332 waivers, would have codified CSR payments to insurance companies, and it was really just a Band-Aid, a small Band-Aid on a market that's imploding. But they failed to include that in the funding bill. So it's at this point, pretty much dead, and there's a lot of disappointment. There was a point not long ago when every Democrat in the Senate supported the legislation. They had enough Republicans to get it past the 60 vote threshold. Senator McConnell said he was going to bring it up for a vote, and for politics completely unrelated, related to abortion rights, it failed. So at this point, it looks like it is not going anywhere, and that's disappointing for all of us.
In the meantime, you've got the states, many states that seem to be going in the opposite direction, pushing out, for example, in Idaho, and trying to get regulatory flexibility to not just to move a little bit outside the limits of the guaranteed minimum essential health benefits of the ACA, but to go way outside of it. We saw this week America's Health Insurance Plans and the Blues collectively said that we're going to see the advent of junk insurance again, of the extremely skinny plans. That's only going to create much more adverse selection with the older and sicker and standard plans.
Yep, and I think if you step back, we've been talking about this for a while, but if you look at the broader political environment, what's happening in the states, what's happening on the ground politically, and what could happen in November, and juxtapose that with what's happening in the markets, you could see a scenario where Democrats could control Congress again and inherit a market that's wildly broken. And you see the far left of the party screaming single payer in reaction to the Republicans' repeal. And we've got more than half of the House Democrats co-sponsoring a bill to create a single-payer program. Now, I don't think it's going anywhere. CBO says that bill's going to cost $32 trillion. They all know that this is just pure messaging. But it's setting up a broader framework for the Democrats to run on, which is more and more increased government involvement. And that will probably evolve into more of a public option type scenario, more Medicare access, Medicaid access, but either way, it's going to encroach on the employer-sponsored insurance environment, and that's a big threat to us. So.
And that is scary. It may be messaging, it may be just a popular thing. Your friends like Cory Booker and Kirsten Gillibrand may really be, not serious when they're signing on to they're in on the joke when they sign on to Bernie Sanders' bill, but this is a very dangerous path and a worrisome one, particularly with the strong possibility of Democratic control of Congress.
That's absolutely right.
And so final observation that I would make on healthcare generally is that we've had an environment where increasingly over the last couple of years, you've got the PBMs, the drug companies, the hospitals, the plans, all the major stakeholders aiming at one another in terms of where is the cost curve going to be broken. And so I'm hopeful, there's nothing formal to it, but I'm hopeful that we can put aside our differences with these other sectors, at least with respect to these core issues as to where are we going on single payer. And so I would see in the next year or so potentially some movement on that. As one of my friends with one of the rival sectors said to us, even the United States collaborated with Joseph Stalin to win the Second World War. So I'm hopeful that we'll get some traction. So,
and in the short term, we do have the president speaking on drug prices next week. I don't know that we've seen a lot of preview of what that speech is going to be, but that's certainly a sector I know we're all watching. And
I expect it to be a lot of nothing.
I don't know about a lot of nothing, but I'm not expecting to see a lot of pain that's going to be inflicted on the drug companies in that.
Yeah. Well, with that, we've now eaten all of our vegetables, and we can get on to dessert, which I know we're all looking forward to. It is an election year, as we've kind of danced around earlier. Are there any particular races you guys are keeping an eye on? My old boss is up in Ohio, so I'm looking at Sherrod Brown real closely. But what do you guys look at? What are you guys watching that really impacts us for the fall?
I'm watching Arizona, Florida, and Tennessee.
And to a lesser extent, Mississippi even. You've got Senator Cochran's open seat, and you've got a Steve Bannon-backed right-wing extremist who's in an open environment, sort of they'll have a runoff there. You've got former Congressman Mike Espy, a moderate African-American Democrat, a felon, I should note, but who's in the running. And you've got a new Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, who I've met and found to be impressive. But that's, that could be another Alabama-type situation. And likewise, as Joel mentioned, Tennessee is a situation where, the most recent polls show even though Tennessee, my home state, has been trending red in the last decade, Former moderate Democratic Governor Phil Bredesen is polling up significantly over very conservative Marsha Blackburn, an outspoken Trump supporter. So then the question is going to be, how about these 10 seats that are occupied by Democrats in states that Trump won, many of which by double digits?
This is the challenge, right? So Democrats need 2 seats to win back the Senate. They would have to preserve, they need to win all 24 seats that are up for re-election, 10 of which are in the Trump states. But if you go state by state, they're looking okay. I think West Virginia, it depends on what happens in the Republican primary there, but we got a former governor, now Senator Joe Manchin, who's wildly popular. John Tester in Montana, widely popular, should be fine. Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota. I think, and again, I think that the threats are Claire McCaskill in Missouri. She's got a tough race there, Joe Donnelly in Indiana. But those are both very strong candidates. Florida is just going to be a ridiculous.
Yeah, it's the sitting governor versus a senator who's been there since 2000, I think.
So you have a wildly conservative governor who's very close with Trump, but also pretty. He's wildly wealthy, and he will spend as much money as it takes, I think. But any governor in a scenario where you had that kind of hurricane hit and come out with. He was set up to succeed, essentially, and I think that he's got a good race. And now Bill Nelson, you got the gun issue down there. Florida could go either direction, but it's going to be close.
And you mentioned Arizona as well. That's Kyrsten Sinema, sitting congresswoman for Jeff Flake's open seat. I don't.
Martha McSally is in a 3-way primary there, and I'm a huge Martha fan. Joel's a big Kyrsten fan.
Yeah,
and I think we both like them very much, but. These things, it would be unusual if they sort of broke out state by state. As Charlie Cook always notes, there tend to be waves. They don't tend, if Democrats retake control of the Senate, they may retake control of the Senate by a number of seats. If everything breaks their way, as everything broke the way of Republicans in the Senate races in 2016. And so
I like to think about the 2006 race when Democrats won back Congress, and that was a vote about the Iraq War and about George W. Bush. We had a lot of accidental members of Congress here that were here for a very short period of time. They voted for the ACA and they got voted out of office.
We
could see something like
former
that.
Former RNC chair, former Mississippi Governor Haley Barbour was asked when he was chairman of the party about all of the accidental congressmen that got washed in 1994. He says, asked if they were all going to survive. He says, well, in every rising tide, there's always flotsam and jetsam. So I think we may have a little bit of that after this election.
Well, and we've covered the Senate a lot. I know Blair probably had some House members she wanted to mention, so I want to make sure she had a chance.
I think Pennsylvania, the whole entire state, since they had all of the House members are going to be running in different seats, and with not a lot of time to prepare in those districts, they had a redistricting court decision, and so you already have seen one retirement because of that, Ryan Costello. And so Connor Lamb, who won in a very Trump-safe district, is now going to be running against, in a new district, against a sitting member, Keith Rothfuss.
Who's a member of the Financial Services Committee and has been a friend of us.
Yeah. So it'll be, and then all the New York seats, really all of the moderate Republicans in the Northeast, I'll be watching because they always have a race.
And keep a big eye on Congressman Tom MacArthur. He was a leader on the ACA efforts last year. He was a commercial insurance executive, a major one, first at AIG, then at York Risk Management, member of the Financial Services Committee. He's a guy who gets the commercial insurance brokerage industry in a very tough race in the Jersey suburbs of Philadelphia.
Right, and then the open seats in Minnesota, there are quite a few, and then seeing if Jason Lewis can keep on to his. So I tend to look at the moderate races, just because those are the ones that win majorities for either side.
And, this is where I feel blessed that we do have, thanks to the generosity of many people in our organization, we have the largest political action committee in the insurance industry, and this is a year where we need to continue to reward our friends and challenge those who have not been as generous to us.
Well, I'm going to let that be the last word because I think that's the perfect way to end. So thank you again for listening to CouncilCast. If you have any questions for us or any comments on how we've done today or in any of our other episodes, you can find us at CIAB.com. We're on Twitter at the CIAB. Or this is new, you can email in any questions or comments to CouncilCast, one word, CouncilCast at CIAB.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.